During the recent Super Bowl, some advertisements were aired that had the words, "He gets us." An obvious Christian message, as you saw the ads there. Jesus understands us, maybe is another way they were intending to have it communicate. And it created a gamut of responses, positive, negative, by Christians and by those who don't claim the Christian faith. Were these ads effective? Were they appropriate presentations of Jesus and the gospel? Were they trying to correct misconceptions about Jesus and the church and Christians? And were they seeking to encourage Christians to communicate Jesus and the gospel more effectively, more correctly, maybe? Well, starting today, we're going to do a multi-part conversation about these ads and their messages. We don't want to just throw stones at an organization that really, we have all talked about this offline, really tried to do what they felt would honor the Lord. So they were just trying to present the gospel in a creative way. And that's good. We applaud that organization for what they're attempting to do. It's really, they've got a lot of money invested into it. But we do have to be gracious and biblical in our Christ-honoring conversation about how and what to share when we share the gospel message, and we only have a short amount of time. That's part of it. But what about the creative ways that we use? Okay, we're going to have a multi-part conversation about that. To help us to answer these questions and to talk about them, we've got our usual co-host here, Dr. Tim Hange, chair of our English department in TESOL.
Hello.
Professor Shaun LePage, chairman of the Ministry Studies Department here at Calvary. Dr. Joshua Paxton, director of the Burnham Center for Global Engagement and our missions programs, and myself, Mike Dodds, the director of the CU Press and dean of the seminary. Welcome to the conversation here, guys.
Thank you.
Hello.
Today we want to focus on, there's a number of questions we've set out in front of us, and two of them we're going to start with just two questions. What did you like about the video and why? What did you critique? And I'm going to clarify what we mean by that word, critique the video, but what did we like about the ads? What do you think the creators were trying to do when they put them together? All right. Josh, start us out.
Yeah, so He Gets Us obviously it's an advertising campaign, and it's not the first one of its kind, although their slogan is maybe a little bit unique. But so we had a conversation with some of our students in chapel a few weeks back, and we watched one of their videos. I think specifically the foot washing video. We watched in there and we asked them some of those questions, and what I liked about it, what I like about the campaign in general is that it's a great talking piece. Maybe there's context to these things that we might like them to have, but you got a short little 30-second snippet in order to get a message across, and they fill that with some images and some music. And so, but it's as somebody in missions and evangelism, it's a talking piece because it's out there in the open. A lot of people are going to see this, and it's a really easy question to simply ask somebody, hey, have you seen some of the He Gets Us videos? What did you think about those? What was your thoughts? And then invite somebody to respond to that. And where they have holes in their understanding, you can fill the gaps. So I like it from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Good. Shaun, Tim.
Mike, I was with a big group of people from my church watching the Super Bowl, and I noticed when those came on, I think there were two spots during the Super Bowl. Everybody in the room got quiet and they were paying attention, and so I think it was on a real basic level, it was 30 seconds of no beer commercials, or whatever. So in that sense, they're saying the name Jesus, and it's not a beer commercial. So, at a very basic level, it was better than that. So, but I think I totally agree with Josh that it did spark a lot of conversation, not just, in our group, but obviously around the country. And there've been lots of response videos and that kind of thing. But I think, I applaud maybe the spirit of it and just the desire to get the name of Jesus out there and get people talking about Jesus. So that was good.
Yeah. Tim?
It's so tough. So on the one hand, like there's always a division between, well, there's often a division between intention and impact, right? Often, but we can say a message intending to say one thing, but how it is received and how people receive it and hear it within their context is can be a very different thing. Looking at the website for He Gets Us, there is I'll just read this quickly. How did the story of Jesus, the world's greatest love story, get twisted into a tool to judge, harm, and divide? How do we remind people that the story of Jesus belongs to everyone? These questions are the beating heart of He Gets Us. We hope to remind everyone, including ourselves, that Jesus' teachings are a warm embrace, not a cold shoulder, that He didn't let pro this or anti that opinions prohibit Him from seeing the value in all people. There's part of me that really resonates with that message. And when I see that He Gets Us commercials, I guess because your question is more about my reaction, I do resonate with that part of it. That right now, in some areas of Christendom, being an evangelical Christian, we've talked about this, has to do with your political alignment and social alignment on certain issues. And there's a real problem when we have this disordered love where political alignment and social issue alignment, actually, when we love that more than we love the gospel. And so I think it's helpful. I think if I look at what's helpful in this narrative, I do think that it's helpful to have a reminder of Jesus' heart for the gospel as being primary, and these other issues being secondary. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and Tim, you just mentioned something that I think I don't know. I've not talked to anybody from the organization, but they were using the ads in part to drive people to their website, which is where you're reading. Now, Shaun, you did a little depth dive into what's there for people. I mean, they spent, didn't you say, $2 billion with a B on the website and the whole campaign? What'd you see?
Yeah. I thought it was $1 billion. I thought it was $1 billion, but I don't remember.
Oh, okay,
sure
maybe
now.
$1 billion. I magnified it. Sorry.
And that's the whole campaign. That's over months and months.
Right.
That's not just the Superbowl.
So it was more than just those ads, is what I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they have links you can follow, and they encourage people to read the Bible and to read some other things. And I thought one of the coolest things was that they're trying to link up anybody who comes to the website to a local church. And so, churches volunteer to be a contact point. And so that's a pretty cool idea. And I would love to hear, the stats on that and how many people actually follow that link and actually connect with a local church. That would be really cool to hear.
Yeah.
I think also as Tim was talking, I was thinking about how, another response I kind of had was, so the campaign kind of says Jesus didn't preach hate. And I think there was this moment there when I was watching it that I thought, okay, have I come across as an angry evangelical, dude, or, there was a moment of self-assessment, I think, that took place. And when I say a moment, I still, I hate the idea that someone would get the idea from me that Jesus preached hate, or something like that. I think, as I analyze that, I have, lots of thoughts, but I think, for now, I'm just focusing on the possibility and the likelihood that a lot of people, stopped and said, okay, how am I coming across? How does our church come across to people who don't know Jesus? And I think if that kind of self-assessment is happening from this ad campaign, whether the ad campaign is is good and accurate and whatever. If that kind of self-assessment takes place, then I think that's another positive that can come from a campaign like this.
Yeah, I wonder if they were trying to, on one side, speaking positively for the church with sort of a address of the negative perceptions that might be out there. Does Christianity, on one side, what you're saying, Shaun, do we project a negative image? Just everything we're against and don't like, and unfortunately that gets to Jesus, this type thing. But what might they possibly be wanting to be critiquing and correcting is what you're addressing there, guys? Tim.
Well,
Josh.
so this is where I do have to express a little bit of concern because, again, I talked about intention versus impact. So there is in certain realms of Christendom and certain denominations a kind of Jesus that that just wants to love you, and that's it, right? There's no sin, there's no repentance, there's no there's no call to change, right? It's sort of just the accepting Jesus, loving you for who you are, and anything other than that is interpreted by our current in the current zeitgeist of cultural conversation. If you don't agree with somebody, that's considered, for many, an act of hate, right? Gone is sort of the idea that you could actually have a different political opinion than someone, but still really care about that person, right? It's sort of like, no, you clearly, believe the wrong things, and so we are in an, enemy kind of relationship. So, like, when I hear people talk about, well, when I hear this sort of message of how did the story of Jesus, the world's greatest love story, get twisted into a tool to judge, harm, and divide? See, it sort of depends on who we're talking about. Are we talking about people who interpret it as judgeful, harmful, and dividing because the gospel and the scriptures say some things that challenge us, right? That call us to change? Or is it because there are indeed a number of Christians, and not an insignificant number, who take postures of judgment, right? And so, like, that's where it gets a little bit hard for me to interpret the purpose and message.
Yeah.
Without some more cultural context clarification from he gets us.
That's good, Tim. And our culture today really struggles with nuance. Just the idea that you can have an opinion and it doesn't have to be either all the way to the right or all the way to the left, but rather it can be somewhere in between. It can be a little nuanced, and our cultural climate today really struggles with that mentality. Even as Mike says, Jesus didn't hate. Well, one of my first responses is, okay, well, how do you define hate? What do you mean? What do you mean when you use that word? And that's so important, just as Tim was saying, that for many, if I disagree with you, then I hate you. That's not true. That's not accurate. It's not accurate to say that. Used to be the old adage for the United States, right? Was I may not agree with you, but I'll defend to the death your right to say what you want. That used to be the American way, but it's been chucked out the window at this point. So, a difficulty that I have with this, as I would have with any ad campaign, is what's the rest of the story? And so I like it, I like it as a talking point, but it's got to go further. It's got to become more than a talking point. Like, it's easy to read, it's easy to watch some of these advertisements and then draw your conclusion about the advertisement based on your personal background and your experience with Jesus or Christianity. etc. And so somewhere the conversation has got to go further into the totality of who Christ actually was.
But
okay.
you know, if this whole conversation, Josh, though, is like the starting point and is just meant to be an entry point, is that a bad thing? You know, and
No.
that's where I have to, even if there is some possible misinterpretation here, you know, there's a lot of pre-Christian conversation we have with people before they become believers.
Mhm.
And even Christ was not above using the opener, right? Even Paul on Mars Hill, we see him really use an opener, a conversation starter. That if you were to take that by itself, you would have said, well, he's approving of the religiosity of
Right.
the Greeks, you know, here. That's a wrong thing, you know. But so, yeah, if taken as that kind of conversation starter, but leading to the full truth of the gospel, I mean, it's an approach. It's not.
Mhm.
It's certainly not
Yeah.
unprecedented.
These guys are proven,
Sean's
Mike, that it's hard to separate the positives from the negatives of this campaign. They're trying to talk about both, but getting ahead of you, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
Sorry.
Let me ask a question to rein us back in, because we're going to come back and talk, you know, in the next conversations about these issues a little more depth. The second question was, what would you critique about this video? Now, what do I mean by the word critique? Not just negative, but if you have an opportunity to sit down with the producers and say, boy, I like what you're doing. I just really am applauding. Let's get the gospel out or present Jesus. But I understand you only got 30 seconds or a minute there. But what if you did this and you fill in the blank? Or why did you do that? Couldn't you have done this for, is there some encouragement for how they maybe could have refined it a little bit more? If they only could have done, Shaun.
Yeah, so I'm not being overly critical of Tim and Josh. I want to be clear on that. I just
Yes,
think it
you
is
are. Yes, you
hard.
are.
It is hard, and actually, I like the first question, Mike, because it does force me to think, you know, positive thoughts about this rather than, you know, my default nature of being critical, you know, of stuff. But you know, one other positive thing that I wanted to put out there was that this is more than just that one spot of, you know, all the people washing feet. You know, like they have one that is love thy neighbor. That's
Right.
actually that was a much better spot than I thought the one that was shown during the Super Bowl. So it's a larger campaign, and I think, you know, the point has already been made, but it's creating conversation, and I love that. I love that it's creating conversation about Jesus, and I think we somewhat, and I don't know what the producers are thinking, but maybe their goal was to do that, just to get people to start talking about Jesus, and for us, you know, those of us who know Jesus, to take advantage of that and say, well, what do you think about those ads or whatever, and then go from there and just use and springboard from it as a way of clarifying the gospel, which is really hard to do in 30 seconds, right? So,
Right.
Yes.
Tim.
You're right, Shaun, and they actually state that on their website. They have a list of different questions, and under what is your agenda? Our agenda, he gets us, is to move beyond the mess of our current cultural moment to a place where all of us are invited to rediscover the love story of Jesus. And so yeah, have a conversation. And who is he? What does that mean for us? I like the name. You know, Hebrews 4:15 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin," which The yet is kind of important, but we'll save that for a different conversation, I think. And maybe they are. I think that's a good pause there, and that maybe they're saving that for a different conversation too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not done. There's numerous videos that are out there. They've introduced a few of them, but we don't know where they're going to go with the rest of this campaign. And so sometimes this is a little bit of a oh, how do I word this? This is speaking to our cultural's tendency to type and press send and post before we actually think about it. Sometimes we need to just slow down before we react and see where it goes. See the whole story before we start judging too hard.
And is the message, he gets us, really a needed message? Like, for me, the message of wholeness seems to be like that seems to be the big draw, right? And even for Jesus, he called himself the bread of life. He presents himself to the woman as well as living water. There's a sense of, I bring satisfaction, I bring wholeness. But again, the message of he gets us, like, I do think there's a degree to which that message is needed also in a culture that just doesn't even know, like, okay, yes, there's cultural Christianity in the U.S., but the numbers are showing it's dying in mass. If you talk to especially the kinds of people that you see in this, like the "Who Is My Neighbor" video, okay, we're talking about positive things. I'll tell you the positive things that came out of that video for me. One was, I got to remember, as a Christian, these people are my neighbors. Like, these rough and tough people that you see on the street, the prostitutes, the homeless, right? They are human beings made in God's image, and they are my neighbor, right? And that's, as a Christian, that's a good reminder to somebody who is in that circumstance, watching this video, thinking he gets me, like the Jesus you see like in churches with the robe and the long hair. He gets me, huh? Now that's an interesting thought, right? So, like, I do think that that's actually a good thought provoker on both sides, from the believing and non-believing side. Yeah.
One thing I thought, as I saw it, and I didn't see all the videos. Tim, you said there's others there, and Shaun, that are on the website. Maybe they include this, but the couple that I saw seemed to have a perspective toward, I want to be careful here, not down and out, but marginalized people. Maybe that's a better term. Marginalized just in the sense that it's perceived that Christians marginalize in their thinking certain people, activities, life choices, whatever. And I wonder, do they need then another series of he gets us, sort of the normal, or a different, there's a groups of people that we're missing there. Maybe they're going to have a different series out next year from another angle, because evidently this is not the only year that they've done ads like this. So that just the seeming focus of the people that they say he gets us, and the us is what he's talking to. Well, we've been focusing on here the positive. Let me just go around and see any other positive, any other comments that somebody has here as we're discussing. We're running out of our time here for today, but other things you liked, or that you'd say, hey, it could improve by doing, you fill in the blank.
Yeah, I think there's plenty, like as I've watched the critics as well, they're critical of the vagueness, I guess, of the message. I don't think that the intent of these ads was to present the gospel. So if that was the intent, then they didn't do a very good job of that. So the clarity is just not there. But I don't really think that was their intent. And so that brings up a legitimate question: are they wasting their money if they're not presenting the gospel, if they're not clarifying the gospel? But I really don't think that was their intent. I do think that their intent was to just bring the name of Jesus into the cultural conversation, and to I think invite people to come to their website and read more about Jesus, and start a conversation that's not just face to face, but also just within reading and reading the scriptures and other things. So I think it's supposed to spark action. It's not. I think someone else, maybe one of you guys earlier, called it pre-evangelism, and I think that's probably a good description of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tim, Josh, final comment.
Yeah, I want to keep my critiques to myself for right now for another episode, but
we'll come back.
It's we live in we live in a world of 30-second sound bites and short videos and comments and social media. I mean, that's the world that we live in. That is what Generation Z is familiar with. Most Generation Z researchers would tell you that they have an attention span of 15 seconds. Well, He Gets Us is already, the Superbowl ad is already twice as long, so they've already lost half their audience. But so just yeah, so in that world, in the fast-paced world that we have today, where people have thoughts and decisions and they repost things and information moves at the speed of light, I think it's a good step. I think it's a good step to just broaden the audience of individuals who can be brought into a conversation surrounding who is this person? Who is Jesus? I mean, Christianity is called Christianity because of Christ, right? So who is this person? And we need to be talking about Him rather than maybe the layers of confusion that Christianity has historically stacked upon Him and who He is and what He means. And so in that environment, I find it helpful to start a conversation.
Good. Tim, final comment.
Shaun mentioned earlier, that there are those, whose critique is, well, why don't they, or who would critique a campaign like this that doesn't present the gospel. And it's interesting, Shaun, that you said, well, it's not their purpose. And so there's a part, I think, that people will look at that and critique it and will say, well, why not? Well, it's sort of the same reason why feeding a homeless person or being involved in something like Habitat for Humanity and just building homes for poor people, right? Like, is that not a worthy effort of our time? Is it an unworthy effort? Is it an unworthy, use of our time simply because we're not sharing the gospel directly with somebody as we do that? Sort of viewed within the milieu of good things that we do, like, and I don't say this in a negative way, but like PR for the gospel, I think can be really helpful, right?
Right.
And I think that's shrewd and wise, and can be a good part of a gospel agenda, right? Of a gospel spreading agenda. So as we're focusing on the positives, I would say that if that's what this is, then I definitely see positivity to that.
Great.
Yeah, if I could capitalize on one thing that you said there real quick, Tim, but the aspect of why they don't show the totality of the gospel or whatever, and like as if they necessarily have to do that in every single step, because
Right.
frankly, that's our job.
Mm-hmm.
That's our job. That's the job of every single believer and every single follower of Christ, regardless of what they do with this particular campaign. It's our job to be out there building relationships, engaging with people, and telling them about the totality of who Jesus is in the gospel.
That's good. And I think it's a good reminder that really there's a larger issue here, and that is, how are we going to engage our culture? Because it's changed radically over the past 20 to 30 years. And so that's really the larger question. This He Gets Us campaign, this is a bunch of people who've decided to invest in that endeavor of engaging with our culture, and they've chosen a particular way. And we can sit around and we can say what we agree with and what we disagree with all day long, and actually we probably will. But
we will.
But the larger question is, how are we? How is Josh? How is Tim?
Yeah.
How's Mike going to engage?
At least
with
they're
our
doing
culture?
something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
At least they're doing something.
like
All right,
something,
guys, you're
Good
getting
point.
whipped up, and I'm trying to close this out here today.
I think D.L. Moody was, some lady came up to him once and said, "I don't like the way you do evangelism." And he said, "Well, how do you do evangelism?" And she said, "Well, I guess I don't really." And he said, "Well, I like my way better than your way." So, maybe that's what's happening here. But I do think that, Mike, that, this is kind of a plug for our future conversations, is we are going to talk about that larger issue of, how do we engage with this culture? It's a good question.
That's it. And that's where we're going to go next week, or next time, as we show this. What do you think about the criticism that this was not the gospel? Is it appropriate? We've already addressed some of that. We talked about it. We'll definitely put it in that context. And then that question, Shaun, you just raised, how do we engage a post-Christian culture? Well, it was said just a minute ago, Shaun said it, if nothing else, these created conversations about Jesus. And I'll bet that's what they wanted, and that's what we're saying. And we hope our conversation today will do the same for you as you go out and have Calvary Conversations on your own. We'll see you for the next showing. Have a good day, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary Conversation.